in you know, various aspects of life here in Albuquerque, and you've all been truly extraordinary to me, showing me what you're doing, and with pride, as you should, because the kinds of things that you're doing are really wonderful. I know when I was much younger, the saying was that the only people who cared about what happened across our borders were those who were on the border. And that's just, if it was ever true, which I don't know, it's certainly not true now.
Right.
And I think that it's truly extraordinary, and this is just proof of how much we all think about what is happening beyond our borders, as we should, because it makes a huge difference to our own lives. I know one of the speeches that I made in talking about leadership, for instance, was that unless you do learn not just a few newspaper articles about what's happening in other countries, but really learn, you have no idea. It's like looking at a scene through a keyhole and actually opening the door and walking outside. And the two views are, you know, you can't even compare them. And we all have to open that door and walk through it and see the whole view. And you obviously do. So I'm not giving you a lecture, please. I'm saying thank you for what you do, which is simply extraordinary. Yes, I do know Sharon Mueller. She's one of my best friends, and I am on her advisory council, and we talk a great deal about how to make the whole country not only aware of, but involved in things that are beyond our borders. And certainly the Fulbright program is one of them. And it's incredible that my husband actually thought of it, but the reason he thought of it was that he, having been born and grew up for the first 20 years of his life in, not just in Arkansas, but in Fayetteville, Arkansas. I think he was a football star, and so I think he went just across the border to play a football team in Texas. But that was about it. And so when his English teacher not offered, but urged him to apply for the Rhodes Scholarship, he sort of thought, this was in his senior year in college, he thought, I've got nothing else to do. It had nothing to do with wanting to see the world. It was just, well, I don't have anything else to do. So he did apply. And the reason that he got it was that not only was he a very good student, not the best, but a good student, but he was also a prize athlete, and he was president of his class. And the Rhodes Scholarship considered those three things the qualifications for a Rhodes, and not just the grades. They never take just, you know, bookworms. You have to show leadership, and you also have to show sportsmanship. And so he did get it. And he went to Oxford, and as he said, shaking his head, I worked harder than I had ever worked in my entire life since I was born. He had a tutor. The Rhodes, at that time, I can't believe they still keep it up, but at that time, the Rhodes Scholars were taught by a tutor. They didn't attend classes. They would attend occasional lectures, but there was a single professor that was in charge of his studies and who worked with him every week. And after 3 years of that, and he returned and spent a couple of weeks in Washington, but then returned home to become a professor of constitutional law. And within fairly short order, a former student of his came to him and pestered him until he could no longer resist, saying, "Look, you keep teaching me and the rest of us that unless the best and the brightest run for office and start getting elected, democracy's not going to work. That's the only way it's going to work. And so you have to put your mouth where or money where your mouth is, and run for my seat, which I'm about to leave, in the House of Representatives." And so he finally said, "Oh, all right." And he ran for the House seat, and he won. And within months, it was clear that the Senate seat 2 years later was going to open up because the man was going to retire. And the person who was going to run for that was, as far as my husband was concerned, totally unacceptable for the seat. He was, because he was one of these narrow-minded people. And so he said, "I can't let him go into the Senate." So, grumble, grumble, he ran for the Senate seat, and he won. So he spent 2 years in the House, and then he spent the next 30 years of his life in the Senate. And it was during that Senate, those early Senate days, when, again, you know, so few people, especially in busy jobs, think the way he did for his whole life. He wasn't thinking, "Oh my God, how am I going to get through the work that's here today and tomorrow?" He kept thinking, you know, he'd sit back and say, "You know, here we are in a world war within 2 generations of the first. What's going on here? And furthermore, the weaponry is getting to be unacceptable. How do we stop this process?" And that's when he thought of the International Education Exchange Program, because he said, what makes people stop fighting? And the more he looked at it, and the more he read, and the more he observed, the more he really was convinced that it was getting to know one another. Now, we can get to know one another and still have fights like mad, but at least by getting to know somebody else, you care a little bit about them. You might think, "Oh, you are a fool." But the fact is that you're not going to kill them. You know them too well. You're going to try to persuade them differently. You're going to try to, find out why they believe differently and change their minds. You're going to try to get along, oh, well. And so that's when he decided that people have to spend more than, if it's Tuesday, it must be Belgium, overseas.
Right.
And the best possible way to do it is to spend an academic year, because then you're learning. You're not only getting to know the people, but you're studying. And you're studying under the professors who are the citizens of that country that you don't know anything about. So he first put this bill through that the United States will create a program for an international exchange of students post bachelor degree. There's nobody below that, but they've got to be old enough to really be thoughtful adults. And he didn't put a dollar sign on it, because he knew perfectly well that if he said and therefore we've got to spend X number of millions of dollars creating this, it would go down the rat hole so fast it wasn't funny. So no money was attached to this first bill. It was just the United States will create an exchange program both ways. And of course it sailed through both the House and the Senate. That was fine. So then he was thinking, oh my God, you know, pulling his hair out, thinking, how am I going to pay for this thing? And after quite a number of weeks of thinking, this little bill came marching across his desk, which was for the sale of surplus, of our American goods, which were brought all over the world in order to fight. That means it was not just guns and bullets, it was jeeps, it was blankets, it was medicine, all the kinds of things that one has to win a war with. And they were all over the world. And this bill said they need to be sold to the countries where they are. And the countries will be more than willing to pay for them because most of those countries were suffering badly from having gone through this war. And he thought, and he got his pen out, and at the very bottom of his bill he put, the funds from this sale shall be limited in use to an international education exchange program. And he just flipped it on to be passed, and of course nobody read it. Well, you know, nothing's changed today. No. And so it passed. And it was 6 months later when people really began to realize what was happening here, and one senator walked up to him and said, "Young man, if I had known what you did, I would have put such a stop to it, it wouldn't, you'd make your head spin. Do you realize how dangerous it is to expose our fine young boys and girls to those horrible foreign isms?" So, but it was too late. And there was enough money there to start, not only to start the program, but to keep it going until 1960, by which time the program had more than proved itself.